According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, agnosticism, a person who holds the view that any ultimate reality, such as God, is unknown and probably unknowable. Broadly speaking, one who is not committed to believing in either the existence or non-existence of a God or gods. The second definition, a person who is unwilling to commit to an opinion about something. Wikipedia says that agnosticism is the view that the existence of God, of the divine or the supernatural is unknowable or unknown. Fix reason firmly in her seat and call to the tribunal every fact, every opinion, question with boldness even the existence of a God. Because, if there be one, he must approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear. Thomas Jefferson said that. So many wars and strife are born out of opposing religious views. If people don't have kindness, respect, tolerance, and compassion at the core of their beliefs, then their religion is pointless. Annie Lennox said that. She's one of my favorite singers and songwriters of all time. There have been over 3,000 gods so far, but only yours actually exists. The others are silly nonsense, but not yours. Yours is real. That's a quote by Ricky Gervais, the comedian. I might be slaughtering his last name. Thanks very much for watching today. I am the amazing Flec, and if you're new to my channel, I am currently on break during a 16-hour shift using the treadmill in the basement, and I promised my viewers that I would post a new video every single day of this year, and here I am honoring that promise. And today I think we're going to talk all about God and the concept of God, and the concept of religion, and where I fall on that whole spectrum, and why I think the safest place to be between belief and non-belief is somewhere in the agnostic side of things. Personal opinion. I think we all have an opinion on this. Oh, by the way, today is my 100th video here on YouTube. Ah, confetti! But religion and God is one of those things that you can't help but to have a strong opinion on, because whether you're a believer or a non-believer, the fact that other people believe in God directly affects your life in a lot of different ways. Everything from politics to local communities and their traditions, cultural differences, all sorts of stuff. It plays a huge role in all of our lives, whether or not we actively participate in the idea of one particular God or one particular religion or belief system. And throughout my life, I've struggled back and forth with what it is to believe in a God or what God is or isn't. And a number of times I've come to a very similar conclusion of, I just don't know. And more so in my later years here in life, I've come to terms with accepting that I just don't know, and that's fine that I don't know. I don't need to go out of my way to believe in something blindly. I don't need to go out of my way to find answers for things that are unanswerable in my opinion, and I don't need to just accept something because I'm led there by fear of punishments or promises of rewards. I think that's a wrong way to go about believing in reality as we know it. And as Ricky Gervais said, there's been over 3,000 gods, probably a lot more than that, but 3,000 is just some number. It gives you an idea. It's like a lot of different gods that people have believed in throughout the course of recorded history. And who's to say one is right over the other? There's a lot of jealous gods that think that I'm the only God and that I am the omnipotent one and all other gods are false and I'm a very jealous God, etc., etc. And I wrote down a lot of different notes for this, so I hope you don't mind me looking at my notebook to recite some of these things. One thing I wrote earlier, I feel it would be a big mistake to find, accept, or fabricate answers to questions that cannot be answered by reason, logic, and rational thought. And I think that very much applies across the board to most everything, but particularly for me to the concept of religion and to God. And often when I say something like that or paraphrase like that, people will say, well, what about morality? Like, you have to have some sort of moral compass, and that's what religion is meant to do, is give you a moral compass and explain all these unexplained things about how we're here and why we're here and what it is to be a person on the planet and how one ought to behave. And to that I say, I don't think you need to have religion or the concept of a God in order to have some sort of moral compass, to have empathy, to have compassion, to have the ability to distinguish what is a good action and a bad action, or to be able to know what right from wrong is. And of course, there's a lot of different paradoxes when it comes to one belief versus the other. And there's a lot of things that don't quite add up when it comes to fabricating or constructing a worldview that is centered around a creationist perspective, just as much as it is to completely deny it altogether. So I used to feel like I was atheist at one point, just as much as I used to feel like I was a creationist and believed in God because I was raised to believe that at a younger age. And now I feel that picking one or the other is too extreme for me. It's kind of locking me into a fixed worldview where it's not more fluid, and I'm less open-minded to hearing more about the other side. And not just hearing, I mean like really listening and considering the fact that there might not be a God, or that there very well might be a God, or that the pick any religion's God is the true truth. But it's a lot easier for me to step back and say, hey, I really don't know. It's really confusing. It's very loud. Who's to say that the Buddhists aren't right, the Christians, the Hindus, the Muslims, or any given religion on the planet, whether or not they are right or wrong? And for me, the more and more I think about the concept of God as it exists as a religious thing or like a religious institution, the more and more I feel personally that it seems more as a means of control by fellow man, or has roots of doing that, as opposed to being something that gets you closer to the source or the creator or the divine being or whatever you want to call God. And I really do think that God as they exist, he or she or sexless probably, and if God does exist, I think it's more likely that God would be a female being, a creator being, one that incubates and actually gives birth to reality. But I really think God is genderless. It makes sense to me, at least. But that gets me to my point of that God is something that I feel like is unknowable for us human beings on this planet Earth here. I think that human beings have fundamental flaws in their perception. Completely and solely. We have our 5 or 6 or whatever many senses that some people claim that we have. Science claims one thing. Some spiritualists claim that they have, 6, 7, or 18 senses. Whatever it may be. Be that as it may, we have fundamental flaws in our perception. Any stage magician, any politician, any psychologist can tell you this. Have you ever been fooled by a magician or a politician before? Come on, raise your hand. Now, there's a lot of us that want to think that we could never be fooled by a priest or a rabbi or someone telling us the truth about reality. But I think that we have fundamental flaws in our perception, and that those flaws are often extorted by people in power that want to remain in power. And they may or may not know that they're doing it maliciously. It might not even be maliciously. It just is part of the system and the way that this institution has functioned for hundreds or thousands and thousands of years. Now, I'm not slamming any and all religious beliefs out there or particular religious institutions, but hey, can all of them be correct? Well, according to the founder of the religious view, Baha'i, the doorway to understanding God has many different keys, and every single religion has its own key. And if you are brought up to believe a certain religion or be a certain way, then that's the way for you, according to the Baha'i faith. As far as I understand it, I probably have it completely wrong. But I like that concept, something that embraces reality as a whole to get closer to God, or embraces how things actually are. Because that gets me to my next little rant. If God created everything, and everything, I mean space, I mean time, I mean the concept of the devil, I mean the concept of suffering, I mean the concept of bliss, and everything in between. We're talking totality here, everything. Then if God created all of that, God also created all the stories in the Bible, all the stories all over the world. Whether or not God gave us free will, God still created every single possibility that we are living through. If God created everything, God created literally everything. It's something our small brains can't really wrap our minds around. So using that logic, and if we go along with the concept of the whole God and devil story that we've been told by various different religious beliefs, then God created this other side of themselves and is at eternal war with itself, because two sides of the same coin here we're looking at, then it could be argued that God's a little bit schizophrenic, or multiple personality disorder, or something like that. Now, it's easy for me to say that, being someone who is an agnostic, or some people who believe in God believe and label me as an atheist, because I reject most ideas of what God is, because I feel like every single possible scenario of God existing is just as likely as the possibility of God not existing at all. And as I said earlier, if God does exist, God likely exists in a way that we cannot possibly see or understand. by any stretch of the imagination due to our limited capacity to understand the world that we do live in. We all have a small piece of the puzzle of this little island called Earth in the cosmos. And we just have this little perspective in space and in time, limited by the senses. We only have our senses that can take in only so much information. It just makes sense to me. I'm not trying to sell you nothing here. I'm not trying to get you to get away from your faith. If you found your truth, good for you. Hold on to your truth. Truth is very hard to come by. It's a precious commodity. Keep going with your truth and with your faith, whatever it may be. I'm not here to destroy your belief system. However, I am here to get you to start questioning more about it and maybe come to some more rational conclusions about why you believe in what you believe in, where you're going with this belief, and what the consequences of it are. To get back to my first quote when I started this video, fix reason firmly in her seat and call to tribunal every fact and every opinion. Call to judge on those things and to consider them whether they are true or false, is what he's saying there. Question with boldness even the existence of a God. Like, that's a really bold thing to question if you're raised in a society of people that are very God-fearing. Like, you're not supposed to question that. You're not supposed to question certain things when it comes to religion and faith. You're just supposed to believe it. Because if there is a God, he must approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear. I believe that 110%, if there is a God out there that does exist in the traditional ways that man has envisioned God to exist, I think that that God would probably favor more those who use logic and reason to get to their own personal truth, instead of those who are led into a belief system because they feel like they will be punished if they don't believe in it, or they're just blindly led into it. It doesn't make sense to me that God would want to punish someone who's being true and honest with their thoughts and questioning reality. I would like to think that God would be happy with that result, someone who's actually thinking. And on that note, here's another quote. I am an agnostic because I am not afraid to think. I am not afraid of any God in the universe who would send me or any other man or woman to hell. If there were such a being, he would not be a God, he would be a devil. And that's a quote by Clarence Darrow. I think it's real important to think of it in this light, that you should use logic and reason to get to a conclusion instead of hopes and fears motivating you to believe in something that is kind of a big deal. Another quote related to this, a belief is not true because it is useful. Henri Frederick Amiel said that. I believe he was a Swiss philosopher, but more important than any of these names I'm dropping when it comes to these quotes is the substance behind the quote and the meaning behind the quote. I'm not quoting this as if it was some religious scriptures or anything like that. I'm quoting it because there's substance and meaning behind what these people are trying to communicate here. And I do feel throughout human history, religion has been used as a means of exploiting people who follow those religions in order to keep them in submission and keep a sort of hierarchy of control over society as a whole. And to quote Mark Twain, religion was invented when the first con man met the first fool. Now, I don't necessarily agree wholeheartedly with that just because someone believes in religion or God that they are a fool because of it. By no stretch do I believe in that. I've met some very highly intelligent people who believe in God, and I've met some really dumb atheists in my time too. So it's all over the place. Intelligence and belief in God, I don't think necessarily correlate with each other all that well. Now, I'm not going to sit here and keep quoting a bunch of things that slam religion and slam the idea of believing in God, because I think there's some merit to it. In fact, there have been studies that show if you believe in God and you believe in an afterlife, you have all these questions answered for you because of your faith. You know why the world was created. You know exactly what happens to you after you die. You know that you are a God-fearing person, that your soul will be saved, and you will not go to hell because you believe in X, Y, Z. The quality of the life of those people who believe in these things is much higher, and they live happier and longer, more healthier lives because there's a lot of questions they don't have to worry about answering anymore, and they have a better quality of life because they know that everything's going to be okay. And it can be argued that religion has served to do a lot of good for society, and more good than bad throughout human history. But I'm not sure about that one. I think that you can argue both perspectives, that religion has caused a lot of pain and suffering in the world just as much as it has caused a lot of progression and growth as far as humanity goes. So on that note, for all of the God-fearing Christians and people like that out there, I'm going to quote Thomas Aquinas. To one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible. Now, I think that's a relatively dogmatic point of view personally, because I think that truth to some degree can be explored through the arts of science and through logic and through reason and through deduction. However, due to our limited capacity to observe things, as well as our fundamental flaws in our perception, I don't think we can know everything. There's no way we can. We can only know a small piece of the puzzle. But once again, religion serves to answer all those questions. Everything unanswerable is part of the mystery and part of God, and we can accept it because God takes care of us, and that's just the way things are. So it puts a lot of those questions at ease and at rest. But to get back what Annie Lennox said earlier too, so many wars and strife are born out of opposing religious views. If people don't have kindness, respect, tolerance, and compassion at the core of their beliefs, then their religion is pointless. So many wars have been fought in the name of God in the past. Everything from the Crusades to witch hunts to Spanish Inquisition, so many different things. I can go on, but I'm sure you can find them if you look them up. And if you don't want to look them up, I respect that too. You probably have better things to do than to go do that, or even listening to some guy rant about God and religion while he's on a treadmill at work. Thanks for watching, though, if you're stuck around with me so far. But to go back to why I feel that being agnostic is probably the safest place to be, is because that we ultimately don't know, in my opinion, that God absolutely, definitely does exist, unless you fall into the camp of people that believe in faith so much that they feel as though their faith and their faith alone leads them to truth by some divine means. Then you do you. You found your truth, and there's nothing I can say or do that will pull you away from that, and that's fine. I'm not trying to do that. And then for those who believe in no God whatsoever, and there's no possibility of a God, I think that's also too dogmatic and too much of an extreme perspective personally. So to quote Tim Minchin, science adjusts its views based on what's observed. Faith is the denial of observation so that belief can be preserved. It's something to really think about, because faith definitely does seem to do that. Faith kind of affords you the privilege of not looking at certain questions and certain paradoxes that may potentially compromise the fundamental basis of one's belief system. And science adjusts its views based on what's being observed, which is true. Science is always updating itself. Science is the closest thing I feel that we have in order to getting to objective truth and understanding the world and the universe that we live in. I know there's plenty of arguments against science, that science is fundamentally biased because it's funded by certain institutions that are looking to achieve a certain result, or that science is just anti-religion, or that science has some other ulterior motives beyond that of just achieving truthful observations. And to that I have to answer, of course, there's of course problems in human perception. There's always people who are trying to do the king of the hill and get on top of the pecking order, and that want to use any sort of institutions to their own means to get more power. That's part of being a human, it looks like. However, the nice thing about science is that it does update itself and it will adjust when it gets new data. And a nice thing about science is that it cites its sources, so you can look at the sources of who funded it. Unlike religion, you can't see who funded what, and you can't see what influenced what and how it got to where it is nowadays. There's a lot of that gets covered up throughout history. So a lot of religion's history has been covered up and altered and concealed from our eyes, while science is trying to give us more information to consider and to form our own opinions, in my opinion. And to quote Buddha, "Believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who has said it, not even if I have said it, unless it agrees with you and your own reason and your own common sense." Now that's something I can definitely get behind. If God did create us all and put us on this planet and gave us our free will and gave us our ability to use our minds and use our logic and our reason, I think that God would really appreciate it if we use our brains to the fullest capacity we possibly could and make the best decisions we possibly can, and to do the right thing regardless of any sorts of promises of rewards or fears of punishments. It's not hard to do the right thing. You don't have to do the right thing because you're going to get a reward or a cookie at the end. You should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And that in itself is its own reward. The God versus devil dynamic has always been difficult for me to understand. If God created everything, space, time, angels, demons, that also means God created the devil, the conflicts, and all possibilities that it can ever exist. Based on this logic, it makes more sense that if God does exist in this way, that there are indeed infinite means of finding, knowing, relating to God outside of the various holy books religious institutions of the world. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "I cannot believe in a God who wants to be pleased all the time." Richard Dawkins, he said, "I am against religion because it teaches us to be satisfied with not understanding the world." Edmond de Goncourt once said, "If there is a God, atheism must seem to him as less of an insult than religion." It seems like more wars and more suffering and pain has been done in this world in the name of God than it has been done in the name of science. Science has brought us computers, the internet, and the means for me to communicate this idea to anyone out there in the world who's willing to listen. Science relies on building blocks of logic and reason and creating a sturdy enough foundation that further truths can be built on top. The easiest way for me to sum up why I am an agnostic is because I humbly admit before the eyes of whatever may or may not exist out there that I don't know anything. I really don't. I somewhat have an understanding of how the world works according to my little perspective of it, but I really don't know what it's like to be someone else, and I really don't know what it's like on a larger scale. There's so many unanswered questions out there, and I think that's ultimately why I am an agnostic. And if you're new to my channel, please know that I post every single day here on YouTube, and once a week I post another tutorial on something to do with the circus and flow arts. So whether you want to learn how to juggle, or contact juggle, or spin things on your finger, or even do devil sticks, I'm your guy. So yeah, do yourself a favor and check out my playlist section to know more about what I'm all about. I've been putting off the topic of God for a while, and I've been avoiding politics altogether here on my channel for a number of different reasons. But for the concept of God, I really want to do it justice and spend a good amount of time explaining how and why I am the way I am when it comes to religious beliefs, and how I respect all other religious beliefs out there as long as they are nonviolent and respect the beliefs of other people. Also respect the non-belief of other people out there. I think it's important that we all find a middle ground where we can all converge and communicate effectively with one another. I don't think it's healthy to end a conversation altogether. I think it's a lot better of an idea to keep talking about things so we can all collectively learn and grow together as human beings. Wow, that was a lot to talk about all in one go here today. Thank you very much for watching this video all the way to the end. I've said way too much already, so thank you very much again for watching. I appreciate it very much. And remember, keep safe, be well, stay humble, and peace.